This is the last episode of Season 1 of The Acolyte, and how do I even describe this thing? Well, the Critical Drinker described it like this.
Chronicling the absolute calamity that is The Acolyte week after week has been one of the most intellectually draining experiences of my entire career.
And right off the bat, I'm going to disagree, because I don't find this series draining. I find, if anything, it gives me energy. He also says it is
destined to be forgotten within days of it being over.
And once again, I disagree because I don't think I'm going to be forgetting this show. He goes through the episode detailing the wildly inconsistent characters in The Acolyte, the plot contrivances, and he does it all well and with his usual stylings, and I agree with most of it. But where we differ is, I think, that I used to think The Acolyte was a tragedy, but now I realise it's a comedy.
Power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
Look at that and tell me this show is not a comedy. Now, is that good Star Wars content? I'd say no, but is it funny to me in the same way the film The Room is? Oh yes. And he seems to still be of the mindset of the series being a tragedy. That seems to be why he's glad it's over, whereas I want a season 2 that's twice as many episodes. He points out how much the guy playing Sol struggles in his use of English. He supposedly learned it for this role, and again, he's got a point.
You survived. You killed Indara.
But again, tell me that's not comedy. That a showrunner and Disney set out to make a show with a diverse cast, with the intention of pushing diversity, and then they cast a man who can barely speak English in it, and a woman in the 2 lead roles playing identical twins who can barely act in either of them. And in doing this, they make it look like diverse actors can't act. So with sheer ineptness, instead of promoting diversity, they make it look like a terrible idea. Tell me that is not comedy. Leslie Headland, the showrunner of The Acolyte, genuinely seems to think that in The Acolyte, she's made another Breaking Bad. Tell me that's not comedy. How do I even describe this thing? There are these twin sisters, Osha and May, both played woodenly by Amandla Stenberg. Yes, that Amandla Stenberg. These are the grown-up children created with dark magic by a dark side witch cult. When they were kids, the Jedi came to investigate, a fight broke out, and all but one of the cult croaked while trying to mind control a Wookiee. And that's not even a joke.
I beat the smart kids, I beat the smart kids. Oh, I bit my Wookiee.
They mind-controlled the Wookiee, about 30 or so of them. Carry On Moss, I think, maybe broke the mind control, and the witches all just keeled over for reasons. They conked it, they kicked the bucket, they joined the choir invisible, and then one of the twins, May, declared a vendetta on the Wookiee. Just none of this show makes any sense. It's a masterpiece of nonsense. We need a season 2. After this, the other twin Osha was taken in by a Jedi called Sol, who kind of became a father of sorts, and May, the other one, somehow joined up with a Sith Lord off camera and became an assassin, wanting revenge on the Jedi, and that, we're told, is what she wants most in the world.
I want this more than anything, but it's impossible.
So May and the Sith Lord go to a planet to get revenge on the Wookiee, and I have no idea for what. For getting mind controlled, I guess, and in the gap between scenes, we cut to the Jedi, and May decides that her whole motivation has changed by the time we get back.
I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to kill a Jedi without a weapon. I don't need to keep this deal. What?
She'd found out that her sister Osha was alive a few episodes ago, and just now decided that's who had her loyalty.
You were wrong. Osha being alive changes everything. My loyalty is to Osha, not your master.
And that was more important than revenge on the Jedi, who she's now going to surrender to instead.
What are you doing?
What I'm going to do is surrender myself to Kelnaka, and then turn myself into the Jedi.
So she betrays her Sith master and goes to surrender to the Wookiee, but her master gets there first and has already done him in. So now May has no one to surrender to. Are you with me so far? In the meantime, Osha and some Jedi arrive on the same planet, and they're there to try and save the Wookiee, and a fight breaks out between the Sith Lord and the Jedi, in which the Sith breaks the Jedi's lightsabers by headbutting them with his dark helmet. The Sith tries to do in both May and Osha during this sequence and is too much for the Jedi to handle. May then runs into Osha, and Osha, knowing May is a criminal, tries to arrest her. But unluckily for Osha, May's motivation has changed yet again. I mean, it's a whole new episode now with a new writer and everything that seems didn't talk to the person that wrote the last episode, because this is an 8-episode season with 10 or so separate writers and seemingly no unified vision behind it. And now May doesn't want to surrender anymore. So May pushes Osha away, leaves her unconscious and bleeding on a forest floor to be found by the angry Sith Lord that tried to do them both in earlier. So I guess May just forgot about the whole Osha is who has my loyalty thing. Instead, May puts on Osha's clothes so she could go with Master Sol, who she didn't even know was alive when she decided to do this, because her motivation has changed yet again and now she wants to stab him. Meanwhile, the Sith Lord found Osha, who he wanted to do in earlier in the same episode, but luckily his motivation had changed, so he now takes her away and heals her. Sol, meanwhile, discovers that it was May with him on his ship and not Osha, so as far as he now knows, Osha, his adopted daughter of sorts, he's left on a planet with a murderous Sith Lord. Sol caring about Osha has been his major motivation for the entire series, so of course he leaves with May on his ship and doesn't even ask about Osha. That was his stated motivation, to find the Sith and save Osha, so of course he leaves the planet where he just saw the Sith and Osha and doesn't even ask May, "Where's Osha? Why are you wearing Osha's clothes? Is Osha alive?" It doesn't matter anyway. Somehow, despite leaving first, Sol is still sitting in his ship in orbit while the Sith finds Osha, leaves the planet without being noticed, takes her to the planet of unknown planet, heals her wounds, makes stew, and the problem is that Sol doesn't know any of that. As far as he knows, she could still be on the planet and horribly injured, and he just sods off to the other side of the galaxy. And these are all things that a well-written character would have asked. This show has possibly the worst character writing I've ever seen in a thing, and that for me is what makes The Acolyte truly magical. The Acolyte is a series that attempts to add more nuance to Star Wars by saying it's not a story about good or evil. It sets out to show the good people as deeply flawed, and the dark side as just misunderstood. The problem is that the showrunner, Leslie Headland, seems to have a very shaky grasp of what good and evil actually are, and it's quite a bad idea to try and make out the dark side to just be misunderstood, when for most of the series they've been space nasties. And it turns out that it's very hard to write flawed good or misunderstood evil if you don't know what good and evil are, because Leslie Headland is a woman that watched The Little Mermaid and reportedly, according to her, identified with the character Ursula the Sea Witch, and Ursula the Sea Witch was not exactly a goodie, but Ursula the Sea Witch to Leslie Headland was queer coded, and that's where identitarianism will get you, where the righteousness of someone's cause does not come down to justice or fairness or even facts, but down to who they are and the identity group that they fit into. So Leslie Headland genuinely seems to think that the lesbian witch cult she has written are good, despite all of the horrible things she's written and doing in this series, because they're in the same identity group as she is. So when they take over people's minds, or use dark magic to create mutant children capable of force choking the life out of people without touching them, they're doing that not for power, not for evil, but for good. They're just defending themselves in the mind of Leslie Headland, and this is just art imitating life. This is an on-screen manifestation of real-world philosophy, and it shouldn't be hard to notice quite how divisive this idea is, because all countries have different groups in them, even if it's just men and women, and when members of those groups are willing to excuse crimes because the criminal was in their group, your country is on the road to ruin. The different groups will start to hate and resent each other. Positions will just become more entrenched over time. I covered this in detail in a recent video that almost nobody watched. If it tempts anyone, there is a Korean girl band dancing in it. I wanted to contrast their choreography with Amanda Stenberg looking like she was having a seizure in a diss track. At least that's my convenient excuse, and the editor became an immediate fan. Of the Korean girl band, obviously. The editor is demanding hazard pay if I force them to look at Amanda Stenberg dancing one more time. And that is where we are for the finale of The Acolyte. Sol still has May restrained on his ship, and Osha was still playing around with Dark Helmet's Dark Helmet. Yes, I know I already used that innuendo in another video. Sue me, it makes me smile. The episode starts off with a flashback of the Jedi Master Sol looking like a creeper as he looks through some foliage at two young girls. I mean, I know the planet was supposed to be deserted, but isn't that shocking? And as the episode starts, the young lady Osha has a powerful response to touching the helmet. Typical, and I have no idea what this is supposed to be trying to tell me. Kimir the Sith's eyes go black. Was Osha supposed to be mind controlling him? I have no idea. In this episode we also find out Kimir was the Jedi apprentice of Leslie Headland's wife, and he went bad, which would have been shocking if I hadn't called it 2 full weeks ago. I've so far called out every shocking reveal in The Acolyte at least a few weeks in advance, and it's getting quite boring. There's also some sort of hag-like creature on the island. The crone thing I thought would be Jodie Turner-Smith, because it would make the most sense. It would explain the interest in the twins. Camir's powers being similar to hers. She was doing something dark magic-y when Sol impaled her for no reason, so maybe she survived, but no. Supposedly this, according to Leslie Headland, is Darth Plagueis. Just dropped wild and completely without context into the series. Sol decides to take May back to the planet of the witch cult because he wants to prove that a Force event called an Avergence has happened that the show never really bothered to explain properly. I'm also not really sure what he hopes to prove by this, and he never explains that either, but he says he can now do that now Osha and May are alive, which they always have been, and he's known this since episode 1. He also doesn't have Osha with him, so he goes to the planet and signals for the Jedi to come too. Meanwhile, Osha, on unknown planet with Kimir, has had a premonition of May doing in Sol on Brendok. So Sol is in orbit above the planet, the Jedi are coming halfway across the galaxy, and the Sith are coming from unknown planet, and they all arrive within minutes of each other. May escapes from Sol because he didn't take away her droid, and she picks the handcuffs with it. She gets into escape pod, and he forgets that he can move things with the Force, so May escapes. And when Sol gives chase, I think he's going to shoot her down for unstated reasons, until Basil the Rat Beaver, I think, sabotages the ship again for unstated reasons. May goes to the Witch's Fortress, Sol follows her, then Osha and Kimir arrive, and Kimir just teleports inside the fortress off camera.
Getting this elevator operational is the only way in.
Are you sure?
The show does not care at all about places or time, or where anything is. All it cares about is feelings. If it thinks a moment captures the right feeling, people will teleport clear across a galaxy or through a brick wall to make it happen. Kimir and Sol then have another fight, and despite Sol being outmatched last time they met, and nothing has really changed since then, now Sol is too much for Kimir. It's all driven by emotion, and it's not even a good fight scene. This part, where they float, just did not look good at all to me, and this part, Kimir has now just forgotten that he has a helmet on that can break lightsabers, and so has Sol. Sol here is trying to hit him in the helmet with a lightsaber, and for some reason, Kimir won't let him do it. If Kimir turns off his lightsaber here, and Sol hits him in the helmet, his lightsaber will break and Kimir will win. But he doesn't, because for emotion, Kimir now needs to lose. I think that may be what the people making the show were going for right after that. It looks like Kimir goes from trying to stop Sol hitting him in the helmet with a lightsaber, right to trying to make him do it. I spend most of the time watching The Acolyte trying to guess what the writer's intentions even were. The Acolyte is amazing. It's like a Rorschach test. Meanwhile, Osha finds May and they have a fight. And despite May being shown to be a better fighter throughout the entire of this series, they're now evenly matched because the emotion needs them to be. May then runs away from Osha, stops Sol from finishing off Camilla. Sol then admits he was responsible for what happened to the girl's mother, Anastasia, and I still have no idea whatsoever why he did that. She started doing some dark magic thing after the witches had threatened the Jedi repeatedly. Did he think she was attacking him? Does he now think he was wrong? I have absolutely no idea. But Osha hears all of this and is so angry that the girl who went there to save Sol now uses her force powers to do him in. How and when did she get these force powers? Well, she put a hat on. The lightsaber she is now holding then changes colour to red to symbolise her conversion to the dark side. The other Jedi then arrive, including the Green Lady, who we find is Kamia's ex-master and who thought he wasn't alive for unstated reasons. It seems she can sense him, but maybe not when he has his hat on. If it isn't that, I have no idea what they were going for. She doesn't seem able to sense him when he has the hat on. Osha and May are now friends again and run away from the Jedi. Camilla stays behind. The Jedi set out immediately to track the girls using Basil the Tracker Beaver, but Camilla just teleports to them because, once again, the show doesn't care about time or logistics or space. All it cares about is emotion. Osha agrees to be Camilla's new student if he lets May go, so he wipes her memory, and somehow then the bad guys just get away off camera. They get to their ship, take off, and lose the Jedi despite them all being parked next to each other. I don't know how, it all happens off camera. The Green Lady blames everything on Sol to cover up the Jedi's problems in the eyes of the Senate, and the series ends with the Green Lady now wanting May's help to find Camilla and Osha. Osha is now Camilla's student, and there's an appearance of the back of Yoda's head at the end, so if they get a season 2, they'll probably get around to ruining him next. The show is not very good, but it gave us this meme.
If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
It also gave us a cult of lesbian space witches who all kick the bucket while trying to mind control a Wookiee. It's comedy gold and I want a season 2, this time with Abigail Thorne playing Darth Plagueis, Amandla Stenberg dancing, and at least 16 episodes.
Of course!
Never rub another man's rhubarb.